They said she fell face first into the sand and suffocated. But the sand in her lungs came from somewhere else. Ellie Warren's death wasn't an accident. It was murder. And for 9 years, 2 governments have tried to bury her story. Born on June 24, 1996 in Melbourne, Ellie Rose Warren grew up in the coastal suburb of Muck with parents Paul and Nicole. The Warren family traveled extensively, fostering Ellie's passion for exploration. A family trip to Africa when she was 15 left an indelible impression on her, igniting a dream to work with wildlife in distant lands. After high school, Ellie worked various jobs to fund her travels through Central America, Thailand, and beyond. Academically gifted, she had secured a place at James Cook University to study marine biology, a perfect fit for her love of oceans and travel. But before beginning her studies, 20-year-old Ellie wanted one final adventure, a 6-week volunteer program with Africa Underwater, a marine research organization in Mozambique. The night before her departure, Ellie sat with her father Paul on their back porch. "Dad, I'm not sure about Mozambique," she confided. "Something feels off." Paul assured her that tourists regularly visited Tofo without incident. The coastal town had a reputation for being relatively safe. Ellie pushed her concerns aside and boarded her flight the next morning. It would be the last time her father saw her alive. In September 2016, she arrived in Tofo, a coastal town known for its relaxed atmosphere and relative safety for tourists. She quickly settled into the volunteer program with Africa Underwater, staying at Kabar Lodge with other international volunteers. Her daily routine consisted of morning dives to collect research data, afternoon analysis sessions, and evening gatherings with her new friends. Fellow volunteer Joya described her as energetic and committed, often staying late to complete her research notes. Ellie wasn't there to party, Joya would later tell investigators. She took the work seriously. She wanted to make a difference. At Kabar Lodge, Ellie maintained a low profile. After a minor disagreement with management, she had been prohibited from drinking alcohol at the facility, a restriction she accepted without complaint, according to staff and fellow volunteers. Fast forward to November 8th, Ellie returned to Tofo to bid farewell to friends before her planned return to Australia. Her intention was to spend one night at a local hostel, but first she wanted to see her companions one last time. Around 6:30 p.m., she arrived at Kabar Lodge with her travel bag, meeting Joya and others for what should have been a night of fond farewells. A photo from that evening shows Ellie sitting quietly with a bottle of water while others enjoyed alcoholic beverages. As the evening progressed, the group moved to Victor's Bar near the local marketplace. Ellie first stopped at her hostel to drop off her belongings and change clothes before joining them. By all accounts, she drank very little that night, 1 beer at most, before the group visited a local's house for a small gathering where she had a single cocktail. After about an hour, Ellie wanted to return to Victor's Bar. Her friends weren't ready to leave, so she went ahead alone. When they eventually followed, they learned from other expatriates that Ellie had been looking for them, but had somehow missed them in the crowded venue. Around 11 p.m., Ellie found her friend sitting on the beach. "I was just looking for you guys," she said cheerfully, appearing sober and in good spirits. After a brief conversation, she returned to the bar for another drink, promising to rejoin them momentarily. She never did. By 11:30 p.m., her friends headed back to their accommodations, unaware that something was terribly wrong. The following morning, a local fisherman walking past a small toilet block near the marketplace noticed something unusual: a young woman lying face down in the dirt. At first, he thought she might be sleeping off a night of excess, not uncommon in an area frequented by tourists. But as he approached, the stillness of her body triggered alarm. The woman was Ellie Warren. She was unresponsive, her lower body partially exposed, with visible injuries around her neck and mouth. Sand covered her face. The fishermen immediately called for help. When first responders arrived, they found a scene that defied easy explanation. Ellie's position seemed deliberate rather than the result of a fall. Her clothing was torn in a manner consistent with a struggle. Later that day, a security guard from Hotel Tofo came forward with critical information. He claimed to have seen Ellie around 2 a.m. walking toward her hostel, appearing highly intoxicated, a description that contradicted every witness account from earlier in the evening. Even more puzzling, the guard stated that moments after seeing her stumble toward her hostel, he observed her change direction and head toward the marketplace area where her body was later found. This testimony raised immediate questions. How did Ellie, described as sober at 11:15 p.m., become severely intoxicated by 2 a.m. with no witnesses seeing her consume additional alcohol? Why would she walk toward her hostel only to abruptly change course toward an isolated area? Have you ever been in a situation where your instincts told you something was wrong, but you couldn't quite identify the threat? What precautions would you take if traveling alone in a foreign country? If this story has you thinking about travel safety, share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else stay safe on their next adventure. What followed Ellie's death was not a determined search for truth, but a chain of increasingly suspicious inconsistencies. Mozambican police classified Ellie's death as sudden and unexplained, noting no clear signs of violence despite the visible injuries and torn clothing. The first autopsy, conducted hastily in Mozambique, concluded she had died from asphyxiation due to inhaling sand, suggesting she had fallen face first, leading to accidental suffocation. Case closed? Far from it. The Australian government dispatched Agent Blake Gray to gather information. Gray's actions revealed the first cracks in the official narrative. He interviewed the fisherman who discovered Ellie's body and photographed the original crime scene image. He also spoke with a local diver named Steve, who had helped identify Ellie. Steve's observations proved crucial. The sand in her mouth didn't look like it got there from a fall. It was packed tight, deliberately placed. I've seen people fall on beaches for 20 years. This wasn't that. A second autopsy in South Africa revealed what would become the most damning piece of evidence. Sand had been packed so tightly into Ellie's airways that it had the consistency of concrete. Medical experts confirmed this level of compression could only result from deliberate force, not an accidental fall. Toxicology reports showed no illegal substances in Ellie's system and minimal alcohol, contradicting the security guard's claim that she appeared severely intoxicated. Then came the bombshell. Australian Federal Police investigator N.L. Scruton collected sand samples from the crime scene and compared them to the sand found in Ellie's lungs. They didn't match. This critical discovery indicated Ellie had been suffocated with sand from a different location, and her body had been moved to the toilet block. Clear evidence of foul play and premeditation. When Ellie's body was repatriated to Australia, a third autopsy listed her cause of death as undetermined, despite mounting evidence of homicide. A clear photograph of the crime scene was finally sent to Australian authorities, showing torn clothing and bruises on Ellie's body. Yet officials chose not to take independent action or assist with the investigation. The mishandling continued. On May 2017, 6 months after Ellie's death, Mozambican police sent Australian authorities their first formal report, a mere 2 pages, concluding Ellie had died from a drug overdose, directly contradicting the toxicology findings. When Australian officials questioned this conclusion, a second report arrived 4 days later stating her death could have been homicide. The contradictions piled up like the sand in Ellie's lungs. First, an accidental fall. Then, a drug overdose. Finally, a potential homicide. Throughout this process, the Australian Federal Police failed to file a mutual assistance request that would have allowed direct participation in the investigation. This procedural step, standard practice in overseas deaths of Australian citizens, was inexplicably omitted. Why? What forces were working to ensure this case remained in bureaucratic limbo? Both governments seemed content to let Ellie's death fade from memory, a tragedy best forgotten. But they hadn't accounted for a father's determination to uncover the truth. In October 2018, nearly 2 years after Ellie's murder, Paul traveled to Mozambique. With no official support, he retraced his daughter's final steps through Tofo, speaking to locals and putting up posters offering rewards for information. His grassroots investigation yielded results within days. A local approached him with a high-quality photograph of Ellie's body showing her blouse torn from shoulder to side, evidence of a violent struggle that had been downplayed in official reports. "When I saw that photo, everything changed," Paul later told Australian media. "This wasn't a drunk girl who fell. This was my daughter fighting for her life." Paul's investigation uncovered 2 local witnesses who had been present shortly after Ellie's body was discovered. Their accounts contradicted the official narrative in a crucial way. They described Ellie's body positioned differently than in the fisherman's photograph. This discrepancy suggested someone had moved her after she was found, possibly to stage the scene. Paul's most shocking discovery came during a conversation with the officer in charge of Ellie's case in Tofo. After building rapport over several days, the officer made a stunning admission. "Your daughter was killed elsewhere and transported to the toilet block." This statement directly contradicted years of official reports claiming Ellie had died where she was found. When Paul asked why this critical information hadn't been included in any official documentation, the officer grew uncomfortable and ended the conversation. Paul also learned that potential witnesses had been discouraged from coming forward. Several locals confided that they had been explicitly told not to speak about Ellie's case, especially to foreigners or journalists. People were scared, Paul observed, not just of criminals, but of authorities. In March 2021, a breakthrough arrived from an unexpected source. A tourist who had visited Tofo reported that locals spoke of a man named Tony in connection with Ellie's death. Tony wasn't just anyone. According to multiple sources, he was a figure with significant influence in the area's criminal networks, with connections extending into local government. These connections reportedly allowed him to operate with minimal interference from authorities. Paul partnered with a German private investigator to infiltrate Tony's circle, but the operation proved too dangerous to continue when their inquiries were met with explicit threats. Why would a criminal organization target a young Australian volunteer? The answer may lie in Tofo's complex underground economy. The region has dealt with issues of drug trafficking, human trafficking, and corruption, all operating beneath the surface of its tourist-friendly image. Was Ellie's death connected to these criminal enterprises? Did she witness something she shouldn't have? Or was she simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? The reluctance of both Australian and Mozambican officials to pursue the case vigorously raises questions about international relations and economic interests. Mozambique depends heavily on tourism revenue, with its pristine beaches attracting thousands of visitors annually. A high-profile murder investigation involving a foreign national could damage this vital income source. For Australia, diplomatic relationships in Africa represent strategic and economic importance. Pushing too hard on a criminal investigation might strain these ties. Meanwhile, Ellie's mother hired a Mozambican lawyer, forcing authorities to reopen the case. This legal pressure led to a significant development in May 2023, when Mozambican officials publicly ruled Ellie's death a homicide and named potential suspects, while simultaneously claiming insufficient evidence for arrests. This leads to an uncomfortable question. How many other cases like Ellie's exist around the world? How many deaths are classified as accidents or misadventures because the truth is inconvenient for powerful interests? If you found this investigation valuable, please take a moment to share this video with others who care about justice. Every share expands our community of people committed to ensuring victims aren't forgotten. Hit that like button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it. In December 2023, the Australian inquest finally concluded. The state coroner acknowledged murder as a possibility, but stopped short of declaring it officially, citing lack of definitive proof despite the mountain of evidence suggesting foul play. This decision effectively hampered international cooperation on the case and left the Warren family in an impossible position, knowing their daughter was murdered but unable to secure official recognition of this fact. Today, Ellie would have been 28 years old. She would likely have completed her marine biology degree with honors. She might have been working on conservation projects in Australia's Great Barrier Reef or conducting research in the world's vulnerable ocean ecosystems. She might have been sharing her passion with students or documenting marine life for future generations. Instead, her potential remains unrealized, cut short on a beach halfway around the world. 9 years have passed with little progress toward justice, yet Paul Warren continues his fight. "I made a promise at Ellie's funeral," he says. "I told her I would find the truth. I won't break that promise." The facts remain clear and disturbing. The sand in Ellie's lungs came from a different location than where she was found. Her body showed signs of struggle, inconsistent with an accidental death. Multiple witnesses described her as sober shortly before her disappearance. 3 different official causes of death were proposed and abandoned. Key evidence was overlooked or actively suppressed. Witnesses were discouraged from coming forward. These aren't conspiracies. They're documented failures of justice. For every high-profile case that captures public attention, dozens more slip through the cracks. Ellie Rose Warren's story represents countless victims whose deaths remain unresolved, whose families continue searching for answers long after the world has moved on. This is why channels like Murder and Mystery HQ exist, to ensure these stories aren't forgotten, to shine light into the darkest corners, to remind those in power that we're watching, to give voice to victims who can no longer speak for themselves. If you believe everyone deserves justice regardless of where they die or who they are, subscribe to this channel now. Join our community of truth seekers committed to keeping these cases alive until answers are found. Together, we can ensure that stories like Ellie's aren't buried alongside their victims,